Do-do-do. Swagger at. It's funny. Hey, Oni. Oh, I am short. Oh, I'm so short. Need to fix that. There you go. I don't know why it always shrinks me after a chibi one. But hey, here I am. V-Bridger's a little sluggish. Dang it. I was hoping it was going to work today. It's cold. Let's see, already had put the hydrate and stretch. Cool. That's just proving I have liquid to drink. Okay. But it is Friday night. We have survived a holiday. And we have survived a week after the holiday. And some of us probably spent way more money on Black Friday than we should have, but I didn't have any money to spend, so I'm safe. Uh, oh yeah, I was gonna do the thing. Let's see, do this and do image. Someday I'm going to get everything organized, but today is not that day. In fact, I don't know where it would have to be here, I think. Yep, this one. Will it play? Oh, there it is. Woohoo! I have no idea how to make this an actual opening, so. But, whatever. Because here we is. I really should work on that thing a little bit more, but like I need to add the Grey Wolf Rare and Magical Books logo on the door and the window, and add the banner and everything else up to it. But all in good time, I suppose. I'm honestly surprised it works. Do it again. Yeah, this is kind of cool. I mean, I haven't gone through and taken the time to render all the books and everything else either, so. But whatever, it's a thing. But anyway, it is Friday night, and it is a fairy tale night. Because we like fairy tales here. And I think I'm going to turn VBridger back off because it's just doing wonky things to my face. Dunk. Yeah, this is much faster. So one less video program running on my computer, and maybe I'll be able to do things properly. Haha, wrong. And if I could do things properly, I'd get the lip sync to work. Where is it? Yes. Use microphone, please. Preview microphone audio. There we go. So why aren't you doing it? Because my mouth does not work properly. But I'm going to leave it on anyway. Just because. But as it is Friday and it is time for Friday Night Fairy Tales, we are going to be back into the Red Fairy Book after a 2 weeks hiatus. But first, I'm going to try to remember to actually advertise that I'm on, because Stream Elements is a bit of a bitch. I really wish they had kept the thing going so it would actually auto-post to X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. Because I don't remember to do it half the time. So I don't remember to do it all of the time. mean, you'd think I would do it when I'm doing commercial break. Well, the starting commercial thing. But no, I just don't think of it all because... I don't know. Oh well. It is on the Twitter now. And let's see, did it pop up? The N. Okay, the N does say that I'm on. Okay, that's good to know. Popped up on my channel, hopefully. Okay, my own Discord is actually posting that I'm on. That's nice to know. I need to figure out how to get the other bots to do it, though. Hey, Melvin! You're in third. No. Only started posting his stuff before I even turned on the stream. So, first and second are still open, technically. Since Kel is technically my bot, so... Let's see. I need to check everything else is working properly. Okay, that's on. Have that on so I can hear when ads roll. I wonder if my sound alerts are going to work today. And I did not reactivate the GB mode. That sounds like it worked. Okay. Turn the chibi ones on. Okay. Yeah, that's not even the longest woo I've done. Yeah. Guilty came in and tagged number 1. Okay. Did you hear it once or did you hear it twice? Because I heard it twice, but I've got multiple windows open. But yeah, it goes pretty good, Melon. How's your week been? Let's see. Get to my woo. Oh. What the heck? Oh, cool. I forgot I had subscriber badges. I didn't even notice those popped up yet. 12 months? Oh, crap. I've been doing this a year? Almost. I don't know what I'd do for my anniversary. Okay, I heard that multiple times. But yeah, my affiliate anniversary is the 19th. I have absolutely nothing planned. Now I'm going to play my cheap little animation again. Just because I can. Let's see. My cheap animation. Doo-doo-doo. Okay, I feel better. Hey, Legacy! Pretty good, other than just being cold, but it's technically winter, so I guess that's a given. Melon Kata Garvana! Yeah, my little opening thing is my test. I'm gonna... If I can get motivated, I'm going to try to do it better. Edit the rest of the scene into it. I usually only stream twice a week, but I haven't done anything for the past 2 weeks. Between holidays and depression, yeah, I had to take some off. Yeah, it was on last night, and I did a couple of Sherlock Holmes stories. And tonight's fairy tales, so. Because, let's see, what is my fairy tale setup? The library. Boo. This one. Why am I sitting up so high? Get in my chair, thank you. But yeah, reading from the Red Fairy book. I've got... I wish I had this copy that shows, but... Do I have an audio filter on or something? Or am I just... Because I've got too many different things opened. Hey, Blank. Maybe just because I've got too many different browsers open, listen to myself. Not much. I was playing some Red Dead and saw what time it was, so I had to frantically scramble to get everything set up for this. yeah, fairy tales. Because that's my favorite thing to read. I mean, Sherlock Holmes, and I've got 3 more stories left in the Sherlock Holmes book I'm doing, and I think I've got 1 other Sherlock Holmes book to read of the actual Arthur Conan Doyle ones. Cat, I don't need you on my lap right now. Let's see, it's already 9:16 Central, so give it a couple more minutes before I get into the book, just because. Wow, Kel, you're just now announcing that. So I hope everyone's had a good week and have survived the food. My cat is trying to get my attention right now. What do you want now? But I hope everyone can get comfy, because I'll try to do at least 3 stories tonight. Let's see, how long are my stories? Ooh. Cat. Cat seems to believe that every time I hold my arms up, I am to hold him. Because he is a big baby. Not sure if you can hear him purring or not. Claws. Yes, you have sharp, pointy claws. Oh. Big fur ball. Okay. And he drools. Why are you drooling? What did you do? Okay. Let's use laser pointer distraction. Go. Okay. Anyway. our first story for this Friday Night Fairy Tales. The Wonderful Birch. Once upon a time, there was let me try this again. I hate getting tongue-tied right at the beginning of it, so. And I do put these all as the stories on my YouTube channel, which Kel will probably eventually cycle through and post a link for. If not, it's down below. But anyway. The Wonderful Birch. Once upon a time, there were a man and a woman who had an only daughter. Now it happened that one of their sheep went astray, and they set out to look for it, and searched, each in a different part of the wood. The good wife met a witch, who said to her,
"If you spit, the miserable creature, if you spit into a sheath of my knife, or if you run between my legs, I shall change you into a black sheep."
The woman neither spat, nor did she run between her legs. But yet the witch changed her into a sheep. Then she made herself look exactly like the woman, and called out to the good man,
"Oh, old man, hello! I have found the sheep already."
The man thought the witch really was his wife, and he did not know that his wife was the sheep. So he went home with her, glad at heart because his sheep was found. When they were safe at home, the witch said to the man,
"Look here, old man. We must really kill that sheep lest it run away to the wood again."
The man, who was a peaceable, quiet sort of fellow, made no objections, but simply said, "Good, let us do it." The daughter, however, had overheard their talk, and she ran to the flock and lamented aloud,
"Oh, dear little mother, they are going to slaughter you."
"Well, then, if they do slaughter me," was the black sheep's answer,
"eat you neither the meat nor the broth that is made from me, but gather all my bones and bury them by the edge of the field."
Shortly after this, they took the black sheep from the flock and slaughtered it. The witch made peace soup of it and set it before the daughter. But the girl remembered her mother's warning. She did not touch the soup. But she carried the bones to the edge of the field and buried them there. And there sprang up on the spot a birch tree. A very lovely birch tree. Some time had passed away. You can tell how long they might have been living there. When the witch, to whom the child had been born in the meantime, began to take an ill will to the man's daughter, and to torment her in all sorts of ways. Now, it happened that a great festival was to be held at the palace, and the king had commanded that all of the people shall be invited, and that this proclamation should be made. "Come, people all, poor and wretched, one and all, blind and crippled though ye be, mount your steeds, or come by sea." And so they drove into the king's feast all the outcasts, and the maimed, and the halt, and the blind. And the good man's house, too, preparations were made to go to the palace. The witch said to the man,
"Go you in front, old man, with our youngest. I will give the elder girl work to keep her from being dull in our absence."
So the man took the child and set out. But the witch kindled a fire on the hearth and threw a pot full of barley corns among the cinders, and said to the girl,
If you have not picked out the barley from the ashes and put it all back in the pot before nightfall, I shall eat you up.
Then she hastened after the others, and the poor girl stayed home and wept. She tried to be sure to pick up the grains of barley, but as soon as she saw how useless her labor was, and so she went to her sore trouble to the birch on her mother's grave, and cried and cried, because her mother lay dead beneath the sod and could help her no longer. In the midst of her grief, she suddenly heard her mother's voice speak from the grave, and say to her, "Why do you weep, little daughter?"
The witch has scattered barley corns on the hearth and bid me pick them up out of the ashes, said the girl. That is why I weep, dear little mother.
"Do not weep," said her mother consolingly. "Break off one of my branches and strike the earth with its crosswise, and all will be put right." The girl did so. She struck the hearth with the birchen branch, and lo, the barley corns flew into the pot, and the hearth was clean. Then she went back to the birch tree and laid the branch upon the grave. Then her mother bade her bathe on one side of the stem, dry herself on another, and dress on the third. When the girl had done all that, she had grown so lovely that no one on earth could rival her. Splendid clothing was given to her, and a horse, and with hair partly of gold, partly of silver, and partly of something more precious still, the girl sprang into the saddle and rode as swift as an arrow to the palace. As she turned into the courtyard of the castle, the king's son came out to meet her, tied her steed to a pillar, and led her inside. He never left her side as they passed through the castle rooms, and all the people gazed at her and wondered who the lovely maiden was, and from what castle she came. But no one knew her. No one knew anything about her. At the banquet, the prince invited her to sit next to him in the place of honor. But the witch's daughter gnawed the bones under the table. The prince did not see her, and thinking she was a dog, gave her such a push with his foot that her arm was broken. Are you not sorry for the witch's daughter? It's not her fault her mother was a witch. Anyway, towards evening, the good man's daughter thought it was time to go home, and as she went, her ring caught on the latch of the door, for the king's son had it smeared with tar. She did not take time to pull it off, but hastily unfastened her horse from the pillar. Then she rode away from beyond the castle walls as swift as an arrow. Arrived at home, she took off her clothes by the birch tree and left her horse standing there, and hastened to her place behind the stove. In a short time, the man and the woman came home again too, and the witch said to the girl,
"Oh, you poor thing. There you are, to be sure. You don't know the fine times we had at the palace. The king's son carried my daughter about, but the poor thing fell and broke her arm."
Not how I remember it. The girl knew well how matters really stood, but she pretended to know nothing about it and sat dumb behind the stove. The next day, they were invited again to the king's banquet.
"Hey, old man," said the witch, "get on your clothes as quick as you can. We are bidden to the feast. Take you the child. I will give the other one work, lest she be weary."
She kindled the fire and threw a pot full of hemp seed into the ashes, and said to the girl,
"If you do not get this sorted and all the seed back into the pot, I shall kill you."
The girl wept bitterly. Then she went to the birch tree, washed herself on one side of it, and dried herself on the other. And this time, still finer clothes were given to her, and a very beautiful steed. She broke off a branch of the birch tree and struck the hearth with it, so that the seeds flew into the pot, and then she hastened to the castle. Again, the king's son came out to meet her, and tied her horse to the pillar, and led her into the banqueting hall. At the feast, the girl sat next to him in the place of honor, as she had done the day before. But the witch's daughter gnawed bones under the table, and the prince gave her a push, by mistake, which broke her leg. He had never noticed her crawling about among the people's feet. She was very unlucky. The good man's daughter hastened home again betimes, but the king's son had smeared the post doors with tar, and the girl's golden circlet stuck to it. She had not time to look for it, but sprang to the saddle and rode like an arrow to the birch tree. There she left her horse and her fine clothes, and said to her mother, "I have lost my circlet at the castle. The doorpost was tarred and it stuck fast." "And even you had lost 2 of them," answered her mother, "I would give you finer ones." Then the girl hastened home, and when her father came home from the feast with the witch, she was in her usual place behind the stove. And then the witch said to her,
"You poor thing. What is there to see here compared to what we have seen at the palace? The king's son carried my daughter from room to another, and let her fall. 'Tis true, and my child's leg is broken."
The man's daughter held her peace all the time, and busied herself with the hearth. The night passed, and when the day began to dawn, the witch awakened her husband, crying,
"Oh, get up, you old man. We are bidden to the royal banquet."
So the old man got up, then the witch gave him the child, saying,
"Take you the little one. I will give the other girl work to do, else she be weary at home, all by her lonesome."
She did as usual. This time it was a dish of milk. She poured upon the ashes, saying,
"If you do not get all the milk into the dish again before I come home, you will suffer for it."
How frightened the girl was this time. She ran to the birch tree, and by its magic power her task was accomplished. And then she rode away to the palace as before. Once she got to the courtyard, she found the prince again waiting for her. He led her into the ball, where she was highly honored. But the witch's daughter sucked the bones under the table, and crouching at people's feet, she got an eye knocked out. Poor girl. It's not her fault. Now no one knew any more than before about the good man's daughter. No one knew when she came, and the prince had the threshold. The whole threshold smeared with tar. And as she fled, her gold slippers stuck to it. She reached the birch tree, and laying aside her finery, she said,
Alas, dear little mother, I have lost my gold slippers.
Let them be, was her mother's reply. If you need them, I shall give you finer ones. Scarcely was she in her usual place behind the stove when her father came home with that witch. Immediately the witch began to mock her, saying,
Oh, you poor thing. There is nothing for you to see here. And we, what great things we have seen in the palace. My little girl was carried about again, but had the ill luck to fall and get her eye knocked out. You stupid thing, you. What do you know about anything? Yes, indeed, what can I know? Replied the girl. I had enough to get the hearth clean.
Now, the prince had kept all the things the girl had lost, and he soon set about finding the owner of them. For this purpose, a great banquet was again given on the fourth day, and all the people were invited back to the palace. The witch got ready to go too. She tied a wooden beetle on where her child's foot should have been, a log of wood instead of an arm, and a bit of dirt in the empty socket for an eye, and took the child with her to the castle. When all the people were gathered together, the king's son stepped in among the crowd and cried, The maiden whose finger this ring slips over, whose head this golden hoop encircles, and whose foot this shoe fits, shall be my bride. Because if the shoe fits. What a great trying on there was now among them all. The things would fit no one. However,
The Cinder Wench is not here, said the prince at last. Go and fetch her and let her try on the things.
How did he know about her? So the girl was fetched, and the prince was just going to hand the ornaments to her when the witch held him back, saying,
Oh, don't give them to her. She soils everything with cinders. Give them to my daughter, rather.
Well, then the prince gave the witch's daughter the ring, and the woman filed and pared away at her daughter's finger until the ring fit. It was the same with the circlet and the shoes of gold. The witch would not allow them to be handed to the Cinder Wench. She worked at her own daughter's head and feet till she got the things forced on. Poor girl. What was to be done now? The prince had to take the witch's daughter for his bride, whether he would or not. He sneaked her away to her father's house with her, however, for he was ashamed to hold the wedding festivities at the palace with so strange a bride. Some days passed, and at last he had to take his bride home to the palace, and he got ready to do so. Just as they were taking leave, the kitchen wench sprang down from her place by the stove, and, on the pretext of fetching something from the cowhouse, and in going by, she whispered in the prince's ear as he stood in the yard,
Alas, my dear prince, do not rob me of my silver and my gold.
Thereupon the king's son recognized the Cinder Wench. So he took both girls with him and set out. After they had gone some little way, they came to the bank by the river, and the prince threw the witch's daughter across to serve as a bridge, and so got over with the Cinder Wench. There lay the witch's daughter then, like a bridge over the river, could not stir, though her heart was consumed with grief. No help was near, and so she cried at last in anguish. Poor girl.
May there grow a golden hemlock out of my body. Perhaps my mother will know me by that token.
Scarcely had she spoken when a golden hemlock sprang up from her and stood upon the bridge. Anyway, now, as soon as the prince had got rid of the witch's daughter, he greeted the Cinder Wench as his bride. And they wandered together to the birch tree which grew upon the mother's grave. There they received all sorts of treasures and riches. 3 sacks full of gold, and just as much silver, and a splendid steed, which bore them home to the palace. There they lived a long time together, and the young wife bore a son to the prince. Immediately word was brought to the witch that her daughter had borne a son, for they believed the young king's wife was, the witch's daughter.
So, said the witch to herself. I had better away with my gift for the infant then.
And so saying, she set out. Thus it happened that she came upon the bank of the river, and there she saw a beautiful golden hemlock growing in the middle of the bridge. And then when she began to cut it down to take it to her grandchild, she heard a voice moaning,
"Alas, dear mother, do not cut me so."
"Where are you?" demanded the witch.
"Indeed I am, dear little mother,"
answered the daughter.
"They threw me across the river to make a bridge of me."
In a moment the witch had the bridge shivered to atoms, and when she hastened away to the palace, stepping up to the young queen's bed, she began to try her magic arts upon her, saying, "Spit, you wretch, on the blade of my knife. Bewitch my knife's blade for me, and I shall change you into a reindeer of the forest."
"Are you there again to bring trouble upon me?"
said the young woman. She neither spat nor did anything else. But the witch still changed her into a reindeer, and smuggled her own daughter into the place of the prince's wife. But now the child grew restless and cried, because it had missed its mother's care. They took it to the court and tried to pacify it in every conceivable way, but it never ceased crying. That would be nerve-wracking. "What makes a child so restless?" asked the prince, and went to a wise widow woman to ask her advice.
"Aye, your own wife is not at home,"
said the widow woman.
"She is living like a reindeer in the wood. You have the witch's daughter for a wife now, and the witch herself is for a mother-in-law."
"Is there any way of getting my own wife back from the wood again?" asked the prince.
"Give me the child,"
answered the widow woman.
"I'll take it with me tomorrow when I go for a drive to the cows into the woods. I'll make a rustling among the birch leaves and a trembling among the aspens. Perhaps the boy will go quiet when he hears it."
"Yes, take the child away. Take it to the wood with you to quiet it," said the prince, and led the widow woman into the castle.
"How now, you're going to send the child away to the wood?"
said the witch in a suspicious tone, and tried to interfere. But the king's son stood firm by what he had commanded, and said, "Carry the child about the wood. Perhaps that will pacify it." So the widow woman took the child to the wood. She came to the edge of a marsh, and seeing a herd of reindeer there, she began all at once to sing.
Little bright eyes, little red skin, come nurse a child you bore. That bloodthirsty monster, that man-eating grim, shall nurse him, shall tend him no more. They may threaten to force as they will, he turns from her, shrinks from her still.
And immediately the reindeer drew near, and nursed and tended the child the whole day long. But at nightfall it had to follow the herd, and said to the widow woman,
Bring me the child tomorrow, and again I shall the following day. After that I must wander with the herd far away to other lands.
The following morning the widow woman went back to the castle to fetch the child. The witch interfered, of course, but the prince said, Take it, and carry it about in the open air. The boy is quieter at night, to be sure, when he has been in the wood all day. So the widow took the child into her arms and carried it to the marsh in the forest. There she sang, as on the preceding day.
Little bright eyes, little red skin, come nurse the child you bore. That bloodthirsty monster, that man-eating grim, shall nurse him, shall tend him no more. They may threaten and force as they will, he turns from her, shrinks from her still.
And immediately the reindeer left the herd and came to the child, and tended it as it had the day before. And so it was the child throve, till not a finer boy was to be seen anywhere. But the king's son had been pondering over all these things, and he said to the widow woman, Is there no way of changing the reindeer into a human again?
I don't rightly know, was her answer. Come to the wood with me. However, when the woman puts off her reindeer skin, I shall comb her head for her. Whilst I am doing so, you must burn the skin.
Wow. Thereupon they both went to the wood with the child. Scarcely were they there when the reindeer appeared and nursed the child as before. Then the widow woman said to the reindeer,
Since you are going far away tomorrow, I shall not see you again. Let me comb your hair for the last time, as a remembrance of you.
Good. The young woman stripped off her reindeer skin, and let the widow do as she wished. In the meantime, the king's son threw the reindeer skin into the fire, unobserved.
What smells of singeing hair?
Asked the young woman, and looking around she saw her own husband.
Woe is me, you have burnt my skin. Why did you do that?
To give you back your human form again.
Alack, I have nothing to cover me now, poor creature that I am,
cried the young woman, and transformed herself into a distaff, then into a wooden beetle, then into a spindle, and into all imaginable shapes. But all these shapes the king's son went on destroying until she stood before him in her human form again.
Alas, wherefore take me home with you again,
cried the young woman,
since the witch is sure to eat me up.
She will not eat you up, answered her husband, and they started for home with a child. But when the witch wife saw them, she ran away with her daughter. And if she has not stopped, she is running still, though at a great age. And the prince and his wife and the baby lived happily ever afterwards. Thank you for the hydrate, because... Oh, God, I have to sing twice. And it's really strange trying to come up with a song. It's really bad. It's the second time I sang it. It sounded slightly better. Ooh, so many fairy tales have songs in them.
Little bright eyes, little red skin.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The next story is probably something far more. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Can't speak. Next story is probably far more familiar. It's also a little bit longer. Well, not really that much longer. Just... It's got its own little section titles. I could probably get you to guess what it is without even saying the title if I just said the first line of it. Because the first line of it, if you can do this. Name this story. And then I'll just come back and start over with the title and everything else because that's how I do things. The story starts out with... Once upon a time, there was a poor widow who lived in a little cottage. Cottage. With her only son, Jack. Can you guess the story? Anyone? Try. Are we running ads? No, it says ads are going to start soon. Let's check that. If we're going to get ads, I'm going to go ahead and wait until the ads are over before I start reading. Maybe. I'm going to go ahead and run the ads, just force it, just so I can do this without interruption. Hopefully without interruption, because Twitch is a pain in the... Never mind. But any guesses on what the story is, just by the one line I read? for those who might be subbed. I don't know. Wow, I did not think that would be picked up on the microphone. Oh well. Come on, ads. Still has a minute, maybe. Into the woods, the road is clear. Into the woods, in the journey. The way is clear, the light is good. Have no fear, no, no one should. The woods are just trees, the trees are just wood. Sorry. Yes, the next story is one of the featured ones in Into the Woods. So. Into the woods, is the dell, the path is clear. I know well. Into the woods, must begin our journey. Yay! We're back from the ads, I hope. Now we can go into the woods. Since no one posted any guesses on what the story is, I guess I'll go ahead and say it. Our next story for this Friday Night Fairy Tales. Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack sells the cow. Once upon a time there was a poor widow who lived in a little cottage with her only son, Jack. Jack was a giddy, thoughtless boy, but very kind-hearted and affectionate. There had been a hard winter, and after it the poor woman had suffered from fever and ague. Jack did no work as yet, and by degrees they grew dreadfully poor. The widow saw that there was no means of keeping Jack and herself from starvation but by selling her cow. So one morning she said to her son,
I am too weak to go myself, Jack. You must take the cow to market for me and sell her.
Jack liked going to the markets to sell the cow very much, but as he was on the way he met a butcher who had some beautiful beans in his hand. Jack stopped to look at them, and the butcher told the boy that they were of great value, and persuaded the silly lad to sell the cow for these beans. When he brought them home, his mother, instead of the money she had expected for a nice cow, she was very vexed and shed many tears, scolding Jack for his folly. He was very sorry, and mother and son went to bed very sadly that night. Their last hope seemed gone. At daybreak, Jack rose and went out into the garden. At least, he thought, I will sow the wonderful beans. Mother says that they are just common scarlet runners and nothing else, but I may as well sow them." So he took a piece of stick and made some holes in the ground and put in the beans. That day they had very little dinner and went sadly to bed, knowing that for the next day there would be none, and Jack, unable to sleep from grief and vexation, got up at day dawn and went out to the garden. What was his amazement to find that the beans had grown up in the night and climbed up and up until they covered a high cliff that sheltered the cottage and disappeared above it. The stalks had twinned and twisted themselves together, and they formed quite a ladder. "It could be easy enough to climb it," thought Jack. And having thought of the experiment, he at once resolved to carry it out, for Jack was a good climber. However, after his late mistake about the cow, he had thought he had better consult his mother first. Wonderful growth of the beanstalk. So Jack called his mother, and they both gazed in silent wonder at the beanstalk, which was not only of great height, but was thick enough to bear Jack's weight. "I wonder where it ends," said Jack to his mother. "I think I will climb up and see." His mother wished him not to venture up this strange ladder, but Jack coaxed her to give her consent to the attempt, for he was certain there must be something wonderful in the beanstalk. So at last she yielded to his wishes. Jack instantly began to climb and went up and up on the ladder-like beam, till everything he had left behind him, the cottage, the village, and even the tall church tower, looked quite little, and he could still not see the top of the beanstalk. Jack felt a little tired and thought for a moment that he would like to go back down again, but he was a very persevering boy, and he knew that the way to succeed in anything was to not give up. So after resting for a moment, he went on. After climbing higher and higher till he grew afraid to look down for fear that he would get giddy, Jack at last reached the top of the beanstalk and found himself in a beautiful country, finely wooded with beautiful meadows covered with sheep. A crystal stream ran through the pastures, and not far from the place where he had got off the beanstalk stood a fine, strong castle. Jack wondered very much that he had never heard or seen of this castle before, but when he reflected on the subject, he saw that it was as much separated from the village by the perpendicular rock on which it stood as if it were in another land. While Jack was standing looking at the castle, a very strange-looking woman came out of the wood and advanced towards him. She wore a pointed cap of quilted red satin, turned up with some ermine. Her hair streamed loose over her shoulders, and she walked with a staff. Jack took off his cap and made her a bow. "If you please, ma'am," he said, "is this your house?"
"No," said the old lady. "Listen, and I will tell you the story of the castle. Once upon a time there was a noble knight who lived in this castle, which is on the borders of fairyland. He had a fair and beloved wife and several lovely children, and his neighbors, the little people, were very friendly towards him. They bestowed on him many excellent, precious gifts. A rumor whispered round of these treasures, and a monstrous giant who lived at no great distance, and who was a very wicked being, resolved to obtain possession of them. So he bribed a false servant to let him inside the castle. When the knight was in bed and asleep, he killed him as he lay. Then he went to the part of the castle which was the nursery, and also killed all the poor little ones he found there. Happily for her, the lady was not found. She had gone with her infant son, who was only 2 and 3 months old, to visit her old nurse, who lived in the valley, and she had been detained all night by a storm. The next morning, as soon as it was light, one of the servants in the castle, who had managed to escape, came to tell the poor lady of the sad fate of her husband and her pretty babies. She could scarcely believe him at first, and was eager at once to go back and share the fate of her dear loved ones. But the old nurse, with many tears, besought her to remember that she still had the child, and that it was her duty to preserve her life for the sake of the poor innocent. The lady yielded to this reasoning, and consented to remain at the nurse's house as the best place of concealment, for the servant told her that the giant had vowed, if he could find her, he would kill both her and her baby. Years rolled on. The old nurse died, leaving her cottage and a few articles of furniture it contained to her poor lady, who dwelt in it, working as a peasant for her daily bread. Her spinning wheel and the milk of a cow, which she had purchased with the little money she had with her, sufficed for scanty substance for herself and her little son. There was a nice little garden attached to the cottage, which they cultivated peas, beans, and cabbages, and the lady was not ashamed to go out at harvest time and glean all the fields to supply her little son's wants. Jack, that poor lady is your mother. The castle was once your father's, and must again be yours.
Jack uttered a cry of surprise. Can you blame him?
My mother? Oh, ma'am, what ought I do? My poor father, my poor mother. Your duty requires you to win it back for your mother, but the task is a very difficult one and full of peril, Jack. Have you the courage to undertake it?
I fear nothing when I am doing right, said Jack.
Then,
said the lady in the red cap,
you are one of those who slay giants. You must get into the castle, and if possible possess yourself of a hen that lays golden eggs, and a harp that talks. Remember, all the giant possesses is really yours.
As she ceased speaking, the lady in the red hat suddenly disappeared. And of course, Jack knew then that she was a fairy. Jack determined at once to attempt the adventure, so he advanced and blew the horn which hung at the castle portal. The door was opened in a minute or two by a fretful giantess, with one great eye in the middle of her forehead. As soon as Jack saw her, he turned away to run, but she caught him and dragged him into the castle.
Ho ho! She laughed terribly. You didn't expect to see me here, that is clear. And I shan't let you go again. I'm weary of my life. I'm so overworked, and I don't see why I should not have a page as other ladies who are well-to-do now. And you shall be my boy. You shall clean the knives and black the boots and make the fires and help me generally on when the giant is out. When he is at home, I must hide you, for he has eaten up all my pages so far, and you would be a very dainty morsel too, my lad.
While she spoke, she dragged Jack right into the castle. The poor boy was very much frightened, as I'm sure you or I would have been in his place. But he remembered that fear disgraces a man. and so he struggled to be brave and to make the best of things. "I am quite ready to help you, and do all I can to serve you, madam," he said. "Only I beg you will be good enough to hide me from your husband, for I should not like to be eaten at all."
"That's a good boy,"
said the giantess, nodding her head.
"It is lucky for you that I did not scream out when you saw me, for the other boys who have been here did, and if you had done so, my husband would have awakened and eaten you, as he did all them, for breakfast. Come here, child, and go into my wardrobe. He never ventures into that, and you will be safe there."
And she opened a huge wardrobe which stood in the great hall, and shut him into it. But the keyhole was so large that it admitted plenty of air, and he could see everything that took place through it. By and by he heard a heavy tramp on the stairs, and a lumbering song like a great cannon. And then a voice that, like thunder, cried out, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the breath of an Englishman. Let him be alive or let him be dead. I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Wife," cried the giant, "there's a man in the castle. Let me have him for breakfast."
"You're grown old and stupid,"
cried the lady in the loud tones.
"It is only a nice fresh steak of an elephant that I have cooked for you, which you smell. There, sit down and I'll make you a good breakfast."
And she placed a huge dish before him of savory steaming meat, which greatly pleased him, and made him forget his idea of an Englishman being in the castle. When he had finished his breakfast and went out for his walk, then the giantess opened the door and made Jack come out to help her. He helped her all day. She fed him well, and when evening came, put him back into her wardrobe. The hen that lays golden eggs. The giant came in to supper. Jack watched him through the keyhole and was amazed to see him pick a wolf's bone and put half a fowl at the time into his capacious mouth. When supper was ended, he bade his wife bring him his hen that laid golden eggs. "It lays as well as it did when it belonged to that poultry knight," he said. "Indeed, I think the eggs are heavier than ever." The giantess went away and soon returned with a little brown hen, which she placed on the table before her husband.
"And now, my dear," she said, "I am going for a walk, if you don't want me around any longer."
"Go," said the giant. "I shall be glad to have a nap by and by." Then he took down the brown hen and said to her, "Lay," and she instantly laid a golden egg. "Lay," said the giant again, and she laid another. "Lay," said the giant again, and she laid another. "Lay." And again a golden egg lay on the table. Now, Jack was sure this hen was that which the fairy had spoken of. By and by the giant put the hen down on the floor, and soon after went fast asleep, snoring so loud that it sounded like thunder. Directly Jack perceived that the giant was fast asleep, he pushed open the door to the wardrobe and crept out. Very softly he stole across the room, and picking up the hen, he made haste to quit the apartment. He knew the way to the kitchen, and the door which he found was left ajar. He opened it, and shut and locked it after him, and flew back to the Beanstalk, which he descended as fast as his feet would move. When his mother saw him enter the house, she wept for joy, for she had feared that the fairies had carried him away, or that the giant had found him. She knew. But Jack put the brown hen down before her, and told her how he had seen the giant's castle, and all of his adventures. She was very glad to see the hen, which would make them rich once more. The money bags. Jack made another journey up the Beanstalk to the giant's castle one day after his mother had gone to market. But first he dyed his hair and disguised himself. The old woman did not know him again, and she dragged him in as she had done before, to help her do all the housework. But she heard her husband coming and had hid him in the wardrobe, not thinking that it was the same boy who had stolen from the hen. She bade him stay there, or the giant would eat him. Then the giant came in, saying, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the breath of an Englishman. Let him be alive, let him be dead. I'll grind his bones to make my bread."
Nonsense, said his wife. It is only the roasted bullock that I thought would be a nice titbit before your supper. Sit down, and I will bring it up at once.
The giant sat down, and soon his wife brought up the roasted bullock on a large dish. And they began their supper. Jack was amazed to see them pick the bones of the bullock as if it had just been a lark. As soon as they had finished their meal, the giantess rose and said,
"Now, my dear, with your leave, I'm going to go up to my room to finish the story I'm reading. If you want me, call for me."
It's going to be a big book. "First," answered the giant, "bring me my money bags, that I may count the golden pieces before I sleep." The giantess obeyed. She went and soon returned with 2 large bags over her shoulder, which she put down by her husband.
"There," she said. "That is all that is left of the night's money. When you have spent it, you must go and take another baron's castle."
"That he shan't, if I can help it," thought Jack. The giant, when his wife was gone, took out heaps and heaps of gold pieces and counted them, and put them into piles till he was tired of this amusement. And then he swept them all back into their bags, and leaning back in his chair, fell fast asleep, snoring so loud that no other sound was audible. Jack stole softly out of the wardrobe, and taking up the bags of money, which were his very own because the giant had stolen them from his father, after all, and he ran off, and with great difficulty, descending the beanstalk, laid the bags of gold on his mother's table. She had just returned from town, and was crying at not finding Jack. "There, mother, I have brought you the gold that father lost."
"Oh, Jack, you're a very good boy, but I wish you would not risk your precious life in the giant's castle. Tell me how you came to go there again."
And Jack told her all about it. Jack's mother was very glad to get the money, but she did not like him to run any risk for her. But after a time, Jack made up his mind to go again to the giant's castle. The talking harp. So he climbed the beanstalk once more and blew the horn at the giant's gate. The giantess soon opened the door. She was not that bright and did not recognize him again. But she stopped for a moment before she took him in. She feared another robbery, but Jack's fresh young face looked so innocent that she could not resist him, and so she bade him come in and again hid him away in the wardrobe. came home.
You stupid old giant, said his wife. You only smell a nice sheep which I have grilled for your dinner.
And the giant sat down and brought his wife up a whole sheep for his dinner. And when he had eaten it all up, he said, "Now, bring me my harp, and I will have a little music while you make your walk." The giantess obeyed and returned with a beautiful harp. The framework was all sparkling with diamonds and rubies, and the strings were all of gold. "This is one of the nicest things I took from the knight," said the giant. "I am very fond of music, and my fourth harp is a faithful servant." So he drew the harp towards him and said, "Play." And the harp played a very soft, sad air. "Play something merrier," said the giant. And the harp played a merry tune. "Now, play me a lullaby," roared the giant, and the harp played a sweet lullaby, to the sound of which its master fell asleep. Then Jack stole softly out of the wardrobe and went into the huge kitchen to see if the giantess had gone out. He found no one there, so he went to the door and opened it softly, for he thought he could not do so with the harp in his hand. Then he entered the giant's room and seized the harp and ran away with it. But as he jumped over the threshold, the harp called out, "Master, master." The giant woke up, and with a tremendous roar he sprang to his feet, and in 2 strides he had reached the door. But Jack was very nimble. He fled like lightning with the harp, taking to it as he went, for he saw that it was actually a fairy, and telling it that he was the son of the old master, the knight. Still, the giant came on so fast that he was quite close to poor Jack, and had stretched out his great hand to catch him. But luckily, just at that moment, he stepped upon a loose stone, stumbled, and fell flat on the ground, where he lay at his full length. This accident gave Jack time to get to the beanstalk and hasten down it. And just as he reached their own garden, he beheld the giant descending after him. "Mother, mother!" cried Jack. "Make haste and give me the axe!" His mother ran to him with a hatchet in her hand, and Jack, with one tremendous blow, cut through all the beanstalks, except one. "Now, mother, stand out of the way," said he. The giant breaks his neck. Jack's mother shrank back, and it was well that she did so, for just as the giant took hold of the last branch of the beanstalk, Jack cut the stem quite through and darted from the spot. Down came the giant with a terrible crash, and as he fell on his head, he broke his neck, and lay dead at the feet of the woman he had so much injured. Before Jack and his mother had recovered from their alarm and agitation, a beautiful lady stood before them. "Jack," she said, "you have acted like a brave knight's son, and deserve to have your inheritance restored to you. Dig a grave and bury the giant, and then go and kill the giantess." "But," said Jack, "I could not kill anyone unless I were fighting with them, and I could not draw a sword upon a woman. Moreover, the giantess is very kind to me." The fairy smiled on Jack. "I am very much pleased with your generous feeling," she said. "Nevertheless, return to the castle, and act as you will find needful." Jack asked the fairy if she would not show him the way to the castle, as the beanstalk was now down. She told him that she would drive him there in her chariot, which was drawn by 2 peacocks. Jack thanked her and sat down in the chariot with her. The fairy drove him a long distance round until they reached a village which lay at the bottom of the hill. Here they found a number of miserable-looking men assembled. The fairy stopped her carriage and addressed them. "My friends," she said, "the cruel giant who oppressed you and ate up all your flocks and herds is dead, and this young gentleman was the means by which you were being delivered from him, and is the son of your kind old master, the knight." The men gave a loud cheer at these words, and pressed forward to say that they would serve Jack as faithfully as they served his father. The fairy bade them follow her to the castle, and they marched there in a body, and Jack blew the horn and demanded entrance. The old giantess saw them coming from the trumpet loophole. She was very much frightened, and she guessed that something had happened to her husband. And as she came downstairs, she caught very fast the foot of her dress, and fell from the top to the bottom, and broke her neck. When the people outside found the door was not open to them, they took crowbars and forced the portal. Nobody was to be seen, but on leaving the hall they found the body of the giantess at the foot of the stairs. Thus Jack took possession of the castle. The fairy went and brought his mother to him, with the hen and the harp. He had the giantess buried, and endeavored as much as lay in his power to do right to those whom the giant had robbed. Before her departure to the fairyland, the fairy explained to Jack that she had sent the butcher to meet him with the beans, in order that they were to sort out what the lad was. "If you had looked at the gigantic beanstalk and only stupidly wondered about it," she said, "I should have left you where misfortune had placed you, only restoring her cow to your mother. But you showed an inquiring mind and a great courage and enterprise, therefore you deserve to rise. And when you mounted the beanstalk, you climbed the ladder of fortune." And then took her leave of Jack and his mother. And hopefully OBS continued that, as it was recording. I do hope that people are still here. And thank you for the raid. I did see it, and thank you for lurking because I also heard that. OBS is temporarily disconnected, so I hope you all were still here with me. And thank you, Coldest Night, for the raid. That is awesome. And welcome everyone in. I'm sorry I usually don't interrupt the stories when someone comes in. It's just... But I'm glad everyone came in. I hope you got to at least hear the end of the story. If not, it'll maybe be on the VOD, I hope. If not, I'll post the version I've got on my computer. So, how many people realize that Jack's father was actually the person who owned the castle the giant had taken over? So I didn't remember that part. So that's really a good addition to the tale. It's only 10:30. Half an hour left. So I will try to get a third story in. Let's see, how long is this one? 13 pages. So we should be good. I really do apologize. OBS did disconnect. But it did not stop recording, so I kept reading. So our final story for the night, which I hope you all enjoy, is The Good Little Mouse. Once upon a time there lived a king and queen who loved each other so much that they were never happy unless they were with each other. Day after day they went out hunting or fishing. Night after night they went to balls or to the opera. They sang and danced and ate sugar plums, and were the gayest of the gay, and their subjects followed their example, so that the kingdom was called the Joyous Land. And now in the next kingdom, everything was different as all could be. The king was sulky and savage, and never enjoyed himself at all. He looked so ugly and cross that all his subjects feared him, and he hated the very sight of a cheerful face. So if he ever caught anyone smiling, he had his head cut off that very minute. This kingdom was very appropriately called the Land of Tears. Now, when this wicked king heard of the happiness of the jolly king, he was so jealous that he collected a great army and set out to fight him, and the news of his approach was soon brought to the king and queen. The queen, when she heard of it, was frightened out of her wits, and began to cry bitterly. "Sire," she said, "let us collect our riches and run away as far as ever we can to the other side of the world if we must." But the king answered, "Fie, madam, I am far too brave for that. It is better to die than to be a coward." Then he assembled all his armed men, and after bidding the queen a tender farewell, he mounted his splendid horse and rode away. When he was lost to the sight of the queen, she could do nothing but weep, and wring her hands and cry. "Alas, if the king is killed, what will become of me and my little daughter?" And she was sorrowful that she could neither eat nor sleep. The king sent her a letter every day, but at last, one morning, as she looked out of the palace window, she saw a messenger approaching in a hot haste. "What news, Koya? What news?" cried the queen, and he answered, "The battle is lost, and the king is dead. In another moment the enemy will be here." The poor queen fell back insensible, and all her ladies carried her to bed, and stood round her weeping and wailing. Then began a tremendous noise and confusion, and they knew that the enemy had arrived. And very soon they heard the king himself stamping about the palace, seeking the queen. Then her ladies put the little princess into her arms, and covered her up head to toe with bedclothes, and ran for their lives, and the poor queen lay there shaking, hoping she would not be found. But very soon the wicked king clattered into the room, and in a fury because the queen would not answer when he called for her, he tore back her silken coverings and tweaked off her lace cap. And when the lovely hair lay tumbling about her shoulders, he wound it 3 times around his hand and threw her over his shoulder, where he carried her like a sack of flour. The poor queen held her little daughter safe in her arms and shrieked for mercy, but the wicked king only mocked her. and begged her to go on shrieking because it amused him, and so mounted his great black horse and rode back to his country. When he got there, he declared that he would have the queen and the little princess hanged on the nearest tree. But his courtiers said that seemed a pity, for when the baby grew up, she would be a very nice wife for the king's only son. The king was rather pleased with this idea and shut the queen up in the highest room of a tall tower, which was very tiny and miserably furnished with a table and a very hard bed to sleep on. Then he sent for a fairy who lived near his kingdom, and after receiving her with more politeness than he generally showed, and entertaining her with a sumptuous feast, he took her up to see the queen. The fairy was so touched by the sight of her misery that when she kissed her hand, she whispered, "Courage, madam. I think I see a way to help you." The queen, a little comforted by these words, received her graciously and begged her to take pity upon the poor little princess who had met with such sudden reverse of fortune. But the king got very cross when he saw them whispering together and cried harshly, "Make an end of these fine speeches, madam. I brought you here to tell me if the child will grow up pretty and fortunate." Then the fairy answered that the princess would be pretty and clever and well brought up as it was as possible to be. And the old king growled to the queen that it was lucky for her that it was so, and they would certainly have been hanged if it had been otherwise. And then he stamped off, taking the fairy with him, and leaving the poor queen in tears. "How can I wish my little daughter to grow up pretty if she is to be married to that horrid little dwarf, the king's son?" she said to herself. "And yet, if she is ugly, we shall both be killed. If I could only hide her away somewhere so that the cruel king could never find her." As the days went on, the queen and her little princess grew thinner and thinner, for their hard-hearted jailer gave them every day only 3 boiled peas and a tiny morsel of black bread, so that they were always terribly hungry. At last, one evening, the queen sat at her spinning wheel, for the king was so avaricious that he made her work day and night. She saw a tiny, pretty little mouse creep out of a hole, and said to it, "Alas, little creature, what are you coming to look for here? We only have 3 peas for my day's provision, and unless you wish to fast, you must go elsewhere." But the mouse ran hither and thither, and danced and capered so prettily that at last the queen gave her her last pea, which she was keeping for her supper, saying, "Here, little one, eat up. I have nothing better to offer you, but to give this willingly in return for the amusement that I have been given." She had hardly spoken when she saw upon the table a delicious little roast partridge and 2 dishes of preserved fruit. "Truly," she said, "a kind action never goes unrewarded." And she and the little princess ate their supper with great satisfaction, and then the queen gave what was left to the little mouse, who danced better than ever afterwards. The next morning came the jailer with the queen's allowance of 3 peas, which he brought in on a large dish, just to make it look smaller. But as soon as he set it down, the little mouse came and ate up all 3, so that the queen wanted her dinner. There was nothing left for her. Then she was quite provoked and said, "What a bad little beast that mouse must be! If it goes on like this, I shall be starved." But when she glanced at the dish again, it was covered with all sorts of nice things to eat, and the queen made a very good dinner, and was gayer than usual over it. But afterwards, as she sat at her spinning wheel, she began to consider what would happen if the little princess did not grow up pretty enough to please the king. And she said to herself, "Oh, if only I could think of some way of escaping." As soon as she spoke, she saw the little mouse in the corner playing with some long straws. The queen took them and began to plait them, saying, "If only I had enough straws, I would make a basket with them and let my baby down from the window to any kind passer-by who would take care of her." By the time the straws were all plaited, the little mouse had dragged in more and more, until the queen had plenty to make her basket, and worked at it day and night, while the little mouse danced for her amusement. And at dinner and supper time, the queen gave it the 3 peas, and the little bit of black bread, as always found something good in the dish in its place. She really could not imagine where all the nice things were coming from. At last, one day when she was working the basket and it was finished, the queen was looking out the window to see how long a cord she must make to lower it to the bottom of the tower. Then she noticed a little old woman who was leaning upon a stick, looking back up at her. Presently she said,
"I know your trouble, madam. If you like, I will help you."
"Oh, my dear friend," said the queen, "if you really wish to be of use to me, you will come at a time that I will appoint, and I will let down my poor little baby in a basket. If you will take her and bring her up for me, when I am rich I will reward you splendidly."
"I don't care about the reward," said the old woman, "but there is one thing that I should like. You must know that I am very particular about what I eat, and if there is one thing I fancy above all things, it is a plump, tender little mouse. If there is such a thing in your garret, just throw it down to me, and in return I promise that your little daughter will be taken care of."
When the queen heard this, she began to cry, but made no answer. And the old woman, after waiting a few minutes, asked her what was the matter. "Why," said the queen, "there's only one mouse in this garret, and that is such a dear pretty little thing that I cannot bear to think of it being killed."
"What?"
cried the old woman in a rage.
"Do you care more for a miserable mouse than you do your own baby? Goodbye, madam. I leave you to enjoy its company, and for my own part I thank my stars that I will get plenty of mice without troubling you to give them to me."
And she hobbled off, grumbling and growling. As to the queen, she was so disappointed that, in spite of finding a better dinner than usual, and seeing the little mouse dancing in its merriest mood, she could do nothing but cry. That night, when her baby was fast asleep, she packed it into a basket and wrote on a slip of paper, "This unhappy little girl is called Delicia." This she pinned to its robe, and then sadly she was shutting the basket, when in sprang the little mouse and sat on the baby's pillow. "Oh, little one," said the queen, "it cost me dear to save your life, and how shall I know whether my Delicia will be taking care of her now? Anyone else would let the greedy old woman have you and eat you up, but I could not bear to do it." Whereupon the mouse answered,
"Believe me, madam, you will never repent your kindness."
queen was immensely astonished when the mouse began to speak. And still more so when she saw its sharp little nose turn into a beautiful face, and its paws to hands and feet. And then it suddenly grew tall, and the queen recognized the fairy who had come with the wicked king to see her. The fairy smiled at her astonished look and said, "I wanted to see if you were faithful and capable of feeling a real friendship for me. For you see, we fairies are rich in everything but friends. And those are hard to find." True that. "It is not possible that you should want to be friends with a charming creature," said the queen, kissing her. "Indeed, it is so," the fairy said. "For those who are only friendly with me for their own advantage, I do not count at all. But when you cared for the poor little mouse, you could not have known there was anything to be gained by it. And to try you further, I took the form of an old woman whom you talked to from the window. And then I was convinced that you really loved me." Then, turning to the little princess, she kissed her rosy lips 3 times, saying, "Dear little one, I promise that you shall be richer than your father, and shall live for 100 years, always pretty and happy, and without fear of old age and wrinkles." Specific. The queen, quite delighted, thanked the fairy gratefully and begged her to take charge of little Delicia and bring her up as her own daughter. This she agreed to do, and then they shut the basket and lowered it carefully, baby and all, to the ground at the foot of the tower. The fairy then changed herself back into the form of a mouse, and this delayed her a few seconds, after which she ran nimbly down the straw rope, but only to find when she got to the bottom that the baby had disappeared. In the greatest terror she ran up again to the queen, crying, "I is lost! My enemy Kalkenstein has stolen the princess away. You must know that she is a cruel fairy who hates me, and she is older than I am and has far more power. I can do nothing against her. I know no way of rescuing Delicia from her clutches." When the queen heard this terrible news, she was heartbroken and begged the fairy to do all that she could to get the poor princess back again. At this moment in came the jailer, and when he missed the little princess, he at once told the king, who came in a great fury, asking what the queen had done with her. She answered that a fairy, whose name she did not know, had come and carried her off by force. Upon this the king stamped upon the ground and cried in a terrible voice, "You shall be hung! I always told you you should!" And without another word he dragged the unlucky queen out into the nearest wood, and climbed up into a tree and took a branch to which he could hang her. But when he was quite high up, the fairy, who had made herself invisible and followed them, gave a sudden push, which made him lose his footing and fall to the ground, and with a crash and break 4 of his teeth. And while he was trying to mend them, the fairy carried the queen off in her flying chariot to a beautiful castle, where she was so kind to her that, but for the loss of Delicia, the queen would have been perfectly happy. But through the good little mouse did not do her utmost, she could not find out where Kenclean had taken the little princess. 15 years went by, and the queen had somewhat recovered from her grief when the news reached her that the son of the wicked king wished to marry the little maiden who kept the turkeys, and that she had refused him. The wedding dresses had been made, nevertheless, and the festivities were to be so splendid that the people for leagues around were flocking to present them. The queen felt quite curious about the little turkey maiden who did not wish to be a queen. So the little mouse conveyed herself to the poultry yard to find out what she was like. She found the turkey maiden sitting upon a big stone, barefoot and miserably dressed in an old coarse linen gown and cap. The ground at her feet were all strewn with robes of gold and silver, and ribbons and laces, diamonds and pearls, over which the turkeys were stalking to and fro, while the king's ugly, hideous, disagreeable son stood opposite her, declaring angrily that if she would not marry him, she should be killed. The turkey maiden answered proudly, "I will never marry you. You are too ugly and too much like your cruel father. Let me live in peace with my turkeys, which I like far better than all of your fine gifts." The little mouse watched her with the greatest admiration, for she was as beautiful as spring, and as soon as the wicked prince was gone, she took form of an old peasant woman and said to her,
"Good day, my pretty one. You have a fine flock of turkeys here."
The young turkey maiden turned her gentle eyes upon the old woman and answered, "Yet they wish me to leave them to become a miserable queen. What is your advice upon this matter?"
"My child,"
said the fairy,
"a crown is a very pretty thing, but you know neither the price nor the weight of it."
"I know so well that I have refused to wear one," said the little maiden, "though I don't know who my father was or who my mother was, and have not a friend in the world."
"You have goodness and beauty, which are more value than 10 kingdoms,"
said the wise fairy.
"But tell me, child, how came you here? And how is it that you have neither mother nor father nor friend?"
"A fairy called Cancaline is the cause of my being here," she answered. "For while I lived with her, I got nothing but blows and harsh words, till at last I could bear it no longer, and I ran away from her without knowing where I was going. And as I came through the woods, the wicked prince met me, and offered to give me charge of the poultry yard. I gladly accepted, not knowing that I should be here to see him day by day. And now he wants to marry me, but that I will never consent to." Upon hearing this, the fairy became convinced that the little turkey maiden was none other than the Princess Delicia.
"What is your name, my little one?"
she said. "I am called Delicia, if it please you," she answered. Then the fairy threw her arms round the princess's neck and nearly smothered her with kisses, saying, "Ah, Delicia, I am a very old friend of yours, and I will gladly find you at last. But you might look nicer than you do in that old gown, which is only fit for a kitchen maid. Take this pretty dress, and let us see the difference it will make." So Delicia took off the ugly cap, and shook out all of her fine shining hair, and bathed her hands and face in the clear water from the nearest spring till her cheeks were like roses, her nose like a cherry. And when she was adorned with the diamonds and the splendid robe the fairy had given her, she looked like the most beautiful princess in the world. And the fairy, with great delight, cried, "Now you look like you ought, you Delicia. What do you think about yourself?" And Delicia answered, "I feel as if I were the daughter of some great king."
"And you would be glad if you were,"
answered the fairy.
"Oh, indeed I should,"
answered she. Ah, well, said the fairy. Tomorrow I may have some pleasant news for you. So she hurried back to her castle, where the queen sat busy with her embroidery, and cried, My madam, will you wager your thimble and your golden needle that I am bringing you the best news you could possibly hear? Alas, sighed the queen, since the death of the jolly king and the loss of my Delicia, all the news in the world is not worth a pin to me. There, don't be melancholy, said the fairy. I assure you that the princess is quite well, and I have never seen her equal in beauty. She is quite the queen. She might be a queen tomorrow if she chose. And then she told all that happened. And the queen first rejoiced over the thought of Delicia's beauty, and then wept at their idea of her being a turkey maiden. I will not hear of her being made to marry the wicked queen's son, she said. Let us go at once and bring her here. In the meantime, the wicked prince, who was very angry with Delicia, had sat himself down under a tree and cried and howled with rage and spite, till the king heard him and cried out of the window, What's the matter with you? What are you making all the disturbance? And the prince replied, It is all because our turkey maiden will not love me. Won't she love you, eh? Said the king. We'll very soon see about that. So he called his guard and told them to go and fetch Delicia. See if I don't make her change her pretty mind, said the wicked king with a chuckle. Then the guards began to search the poultry yard and could find nobody there but Delicia, who, with her splendid dress and her crown of diamonds, looked such a lovely princess that they hardly dared speak to her. But she said to them very politely, Pray tell me, what are you looking for here? Madam, they answered, we are sent for an insignificant little person named Delicia. Alas, she said, that is my name. What can I do for you? So the guards tied her hands and feet with thick ropes, for fear that she might run away, and brought her to the king, who was waiting with his son. When he saw her, he was very much astonished at her beauty, which would have made anyone less hard-hearted sorry for her. But the wicked king only laughed and mocked at her. Well, little fright, little toad, why don't you love my son, who is far too handsome and too good for you? Make haste and begin to love him this instant, or you shall be tarred and feathered. Then the poor little princess, shaking with terror, went down on her knees, crying, Oh, don't tar and feather me, please. It would be most uncomfortable. Let me have 2 or 3 days to make up my mind, and then you shall do what you like with me. The wicked prince would have liked very much to see her tarred and feathered, but the king ordered that she should be shut up in a dark dungeon. It was just at this moment that the queen and the fairy arrived in a flying chariot, and the queen was dreadfully distressed at the turn affairs had taken, and said miserably that she was destined to be unfortunate all her days. But the fairy bade her to take courage. I'll pay them out yet, she said, nodding her head with an air of great determination. That very same night, as soon as the wicked king had gone to bed, the fairy changed herself into the little mouse, and creeping up on his pillow, nibbled his ear so that he squealed out quite loudly and turned over on his other side. But that was no good, for the little mouse only set to work and gnawed away at the second ear until it hurt more than the first one. Then the king cried, "Murder! Thieves!" And all his guards ran to see what was the matter. But they could find nothing, and nobody, for the little mouse had run off to the prince's room, and was serving him exactly the same way. All night long she ran from one to the other, until at last, driven quite frantic by terror and want of sleep, the king rushed out of the palace, crying, "Help! Help! I'm pursued by rats!" The prince, when he heard this, got up also and ran after the king, and they had not gone far when they both fell into the river and were never heard from again. Then the good fairy ran to tell the queen, and they went together to the black dungeon where Delicia was imprisoned. The fairy touched each door with her wand, and it sprang open instantly. But they had to go through 40 before they came to the princess, who was sitting on the floor looking very dejected. But when the queen rushed in and kissed her 20 times in a minute, and laughed and cried, and told Delicia all of her history, the princess was wild with delight. Then the fairy showed her all the wonderful dresses and jewels she had brought for her, and said, "Don't let us waste haste. We must go and harangue the people." So she walked first, looking very serious and dignified, and wearing a dress the train of which was at least 10 ells long. Behind her came the queen, wearing a blue velvet robe embroidered with gold, and a diamond crown that was brighter than the sun itself. Last of all walked Delicia, who was so beautiful that it was nothing short of marvelous. They proceeded through the streets, returning all the salutations they met, great and small, and all the people turned and followed them, wondering who these noble ladies were. When the audience hall was quite full, the fairy said to the subjects of the wicked king that if they would accept Delicia, who was the daughter of the jolly king, as their queen, she would undertake to find a suitable husband for her, and promise that during their reign there should be nothing but rejoicing and merrymaking, and all dismal things should be entirely banished. Upon this, the people cried with one accord, "We will! We will! We've been gloomy and miserable too long already!" And they all took hands and danced round the queen and Delicia and the good fairy, singing, "Yes, yes, we will! We will!" Then there were feasts and fireworks in every street in the town, and early the next morning the fairy, who had been all over the world in the night, brought back with her in her flying chariot the most handsome and good-tempered prince that she could find anywhere. He was so charming that Delicia loved him from the moment their eyes met. And as for him, of course, he could not help thinking himself the luckiest prince in the world. The queen felt that she had really come to an end of her misfortunes at last, and they all lived happily ever after. Huzzah! Oh. Oh. That was starting to get to me at the end. But that's 3 stories and roughly 2 hours. So I'd say we did pretty good. Now leave us find a target of rating. And please stick around for the raid. Who all is on, or if anyone has any recommendations, by all means, tell me. I am scrolling through my follow list right now, so. Anyone on? Anyone there? Don't see any of my fellow story readers so far. I've got a cat clawing at my back. It kind of hurts a little. No suggestions? Okay, well. Good right dusk then. I do have a follower raid message and a subscriber raid message. We got a raid dusk. So, thank you everyone for coming in. Again, thank you for the raid. And I will hopefully see you next Thursday, if not sooner. And I hope you all have a good night, good evening, or whichever time zone you may be currently dwelling in. And I hope I will see you around.